Victoria Hamilton's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the mahogany dining table as she delivered her latest critique. A fraud detection startup. Really, Michelle? I thought we discussed you finding a real career after marrying my son. I took a slow sip of wine, letting the expensive vintage mask the bitter taste of 5 years of subtle insults and condescension. My name is Michelle Chen-Hamilton, and this dinner would be the last time Victoria underestimated me. The software works, Victoria, I replied calmly. Major banks are already interested. Oh, darling, she laughed, that aristocratic sound that always made me feel like an outsider in my own family. Banking is a man's world. Trust me, I built Hamilton Financial from nothing. Women succeed by being supportive, not by trying to compete. My husband James squeezed my hand under the table. He knew how hard I'd worked on FraudWatch, the AI-powered detection system I'd developed. 5 years of coding, testing, refining, all while enduring Victoria's constant reminders that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. Speaking of Hamilton Financial, Victoria continued, turning to James, the Morgan merger is finally happening. $200 million, the largest deal in the company's history. Your father would have been so proud. James nodded, but I caught the slight tension in his jaw. His father's death 3 years ago had left Victoria in complete control of Hamilton Financial, with James serving as a VP under her iron-fisted leadership. When's the deal closing? I asked innocently. Next week. The paperwork is all ready. Victoria stopped, her eyes narrowing. But that's confidential information, of course. Not that a small startup would understand such matters. If she only knew, my small startup had just signed a contract with the SEC to implement our fraud detection system across all major financial institutions, including Hamilton Financial. But Victoria was still talking, warming to her favorite subject, my inadequacies. You know, Michelle, there's still a position open in our HR department, something more suitable for someone of your background. By background, she meant both my gender and my ethnicity, though she'd never say it directly. Victoria Hamilton was too sophisticated for overt racism, preferring the death of 1,000 polite cuts. Thank you, but I'm happy with my company, I said just as my phone buzzed. A FraudWatch alert. I glanced at it discreetly, then nearly dropped my wine glass. The system had detected irregular patterns in Hamilton Financial's merger documents. Large sums moving through shell companies, falsified records, hidden accounts, all the hallmarks of major financial fraud. Everything all right, dear? Victoria asked, noting my expression. You look pale. Perhaps the pressure of running a business is getting to you. I forced a smile. Just tired. Actually, I should probably head home, early meeting tomorrow. James stood to leave with me, but Victoria stopped him. Darling, we need to discuss the merger details. I'm sure Michelle understands. In the car, I pulled over 2 blocks from the Hamilton mansion and opened my laptop. The fraud detection algorithms didn't lie. Hamilton Financial's merger was built on a massive scheme of cooked books and hidden losses. My phone rang. A private number. Hello? Ms. Chen. The voice was quiet, nervous. This is David from Hamilton Financial's accounting department. I saw your software flagged our records. We need to talk. About what exactly? About what really happened to Richard Hamilton, and why Victoria pushed for this merger so quickly. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. James's father's death had officially been ruled a heart attack, but meet me in an hour. The coffee shop on 12th Street. David was young, probably fresh out of college. He kept glancing around the nearly empty coffee shop as he talked. Mrs. Hamilton's been falsifying records for years, he explained, sliding a USB drive across the table. Mr. Hamilton discovered it just before he died. He was going to expose everything, but then... The heart attack, I finished. He nodded. Except I saw the original medical report. There were traces of something in his system. The report was changed the next day. Why are you telling me this? Because the merger isn't just about money. There are accounts, offshore holdings. If it goes through, the fraud will be buried so deep no one will ever find it, including what happened to Mr. Hamilton. I studied him carefully. You kept records. Everything's on that drive, but be careful. The last person who tried to expose this, he didn't need to finish. We both knew who he meant. Back home, I spent hours analyzing the data. David's records confirmed what FraudWatch had detected, But they showed something worse. Victoria hadn't just built her company on fraud. She'd eliminated anyone who threatened to expose her. My phone buzzed with a text from James. "Mom's acting strange. Keeps asking about your software. What's going on?" Before I could respond, another message popped up from Victoria. "Dear, could you come by the office tomorrow? I'd like to discuss a potential investment in your little startup." A trap, obviously, but also an opportunity. I typed back, "Of course. How's 10 a.m.? Her response was immediate. "Perfect. We can discuss your future with Hamilton Financial." Oh, we discussed the future all right, just not the one she had in mind. I worked through the night, correlating data, connecting patterns. By morning, I had everything I needed. Victoria thought she was setting a trap for her troublesome daughter-in-law. She didn't realize she'd finally pushed me into a position to uncover her darkest secrets. At 9 a.m., I made 3 calls, one to the SEC, one to my lawyers, and one to James. He deserved to know the truth before everything exploded. "It's all true?" he asked, his voice hollow after I explained everything. "Mom killed Dad." "The evidence is clear," I said gently. "I'm so sorry, James." A long pause. "What are you going to do?" "Spring her trap." "But I need to know, are you with me?" Another pause. Then, firmly, "All the way. Dad deserved justice. So do you." At 9:55 a.m., I walked into Hamilton Financial's gleaming headquarters. Victoria's secretary immediately ushered me into the massive corner office with its sweeping city views. "Michelle, darling." Victoria rose from behind her desk, all elegant sophistication in her designer suit. "I'm so glad we could have this chat." I sat down, noting the security camera in the corner, right where David said it would be. "I've been thinking about your software," Victoria continued. "Perhaps I was hasty in dismissing it. Hamilton Financial might be interested in acquiring FraudWatch." "Really?" I kept my voice neutral. "What changed your mind?" "Let's call it maternal concern. Running a startup is so stressful. Wouldn't you rather have the support of an established company? Say, $20 million for your technology?" I pretended to consider it. "That's generous. But I have some questions first." "Of course, dear. Like why you're so interested in fraud detection software right before the Morgan merger." Her smile flickered. "Simply due diligence. Or maybe," I leaned forward, "you're worried about what my software has already found." The mask cracked. "What exactly are you implying?" I opened my laptop, turning it to face her. "Shall we discuss the real numbers behind Hamilton Financial? The hidden accounts, the falsified records?" Victoria's face hardened. "You have no idea what you're talking about, and if you think anyone will believe your accusations, they'll believe the evidence, including what really happened to Richard Hamilton." She moved so fast I barely saw it. One moment she was sitting, the next she had a small pistol pointed at my head. "I always knew you'd be trouble," she said coldly. "Too ambitious, too smart for your own good. Just like Richard." I smiled, which seemed to unnerve her more than any fear would have. "Did you really think I'd come here without protection? Hamilton Financial CEO ARISTD FRAGD and MURDEA. $200 million MERGER REVELET A's is massive SCM STAR TUPs AI software XPOZs DCADs financial crimes." I sat in the federal prosecutor's office, watching the market react in real time. Hamilton Financial stock was in free fall, the Morgan merger had collapsed, and Victoria's carefully constructed empire was crumbling. "The evidence is overwhelming." Assistant U.S. Right on cue, the office doors burst open. SEC agents, federal marshals, and James, looking at his mother with a mixture of horror and determination. "Victoria Hamilton," the lead agent announced. "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and the murder of Richard Hamilton." As they led her away in handcuffs, she turned to me one last time. "I was right about one thing. You didn't know your place." "Actually," I replied, "I knew exactly where I belonged. Right here, exposing the truth." The headlines exploded across every financial news outlet. Attorney Sarah Martinez said, spreading documents across her desk. Bank records, falsified reports, witness testimonies, including the doctor who changed Richard Hamilton's autopsy report under duress. James sat beside me, his face pale but determined. Finding out his mother had murdered his father had shattered him. But he was stronger than Victoria had ever given him credit for. "What happens now?" he asked. "We're freezing Hamilton Financial's assets pending investigation. The company's future." Sarah glanced at me. "Well, that might depend on what you two decide to do." My phone buzzed. Another message from David, our whistleblowing accountant. "More files found in the secure server. You need to see this." The next few days were a whirlwind of federal investigations, emergency board meetings, and damage control. Victoria's arrest had exposed more than just financial fraud. She'd been running a sophisticated money laundering operation for years, using Hamilton Financial to clean money for some very dangerous people. "She built the whole company on lies," James said one night as we sat in his father's old study. The grand Hamilton mansion felt empty now, its opulence a hollow facade like everything else Victoria had created. "Not everything was a lie," I replied, squeezing his hand. "Your father built something real before she took over, and you spent years trying to do things right, while being too blind to see what was really happening." He picked up a family photo from his father's desk. Victoria, Richard, and teenage James, all smiling at some Monaco charity event. "How did I not know?" "Because she was your mother, and she was very, very good at hiding the truth." My phone buzzed again, this time an alert from FraudWatch. The system had detected new patterns in the data David found. "James," I said slowly, studying the analysis, "I don't think your father's murder was just about him discovering the fraud. Look at this." The records show a complex web of transactions leading to a series of offshore accounts, all tied to a familiar name, Charles Morgan, CEO of Morgan Industries. "The merger wasn't about expansion," I explained. "It was about covering up decades of joint criminal enterprises between Victoria and Morgan. Your father must have discovered both sides of the conspiracy." James's face hardened. "Then Morgan needs to go down too." "Already happening," I smiled, showing him another alert. FraudWatch flagged his accounts an hour ago. The SEC is moving in as we speak. The next morning, we watched Charles Morgan's arrest on live television. The man Victoria had once touted as her perfect business partner was led away in handcuffs, his own empire dissolving as quickly as hers had. But we had bigger concerns than Victoria's co-conspirators. Hamilton Financial was in crisis. Thousands of jobs were at stake, along with the legitimate parts of the business that Richard Hamilton had built. "The board wants you to take over as CEO," I told James as we drove to yet another emergency meeting. "They think you're the only one who can restore confidence." "Me?" He laughed bitterly. "The guy who couldn't even see what was happening in his own family?" "No," I corrected him. "The guy who helped bring down a criminal enterprise as soon as he learned the truth. The guy who chose justice over family loyalty." The board meeting was tense. Most of the directors had been handpicked by Victoria, though they all claimed ignorance of her crimes. Now they looked to James like drowning men eyeing a life raft. "Hamilton Financial needs a fresh start," James began, standing at the head of the table his mother had once dominated. "Complete transparency, new leadership, and a total restructuring." "And how do you propose to accomplish this?" Howard Bennett, the senior director, asked skeptically. James smiled. "By merging with a company that specializes in detecting and preventing financial fraud." All eyes turned to me. "FraudWatch's technology will become the backbone of a new Hamilton Financial," I explained. "We'll rebuild the company around principles of transparency and integrity. Everything Victoria Hamilton fought against." "You want us to hand control of this company to Bennett sputtered. "To the woman who exposed the largest financial fraud in the state's history," James finished for him. "Yes, that's exactly what we want." Any objections? The vote wasn't even close. The next few months were a blur of reorganization, federal oversight, and rebuilding trust. We renamed the company Hamilton Chen Financial, symbolizing the merger of James's legacy with my technology. The new board was diverse, qualified, and committed to ethical business practices. Victoria's trial was swift and decisive. The evidence was too overwhelming for even the best criminal defense attorneys to overcome. When the judge announced her sentence, life imprisonment without parole, she finally showed genuine emotion. "I did it all for you," she told James during her last allowed visit, "to build something worthy of the Hamilton name." "No," James replied. "You did it for yourself. Dad built something worthy. Michelle and I will build something even better. She didn't reply, but I saw the flash of hatred in her eyes when she looked at me. Even now, she couldn't accept that her unsuitable daughter-in-law had been right all along. 1 year later, I stood at a podium accepting the Financial Technology Innovation Award for FraudWatch's role in revolutionizing banking security. The system had already prevented billions in potential fraud across the industry. The real victory, I told the audience, isn't just in catching financial crimes. It's in creating a system where transparency and ethics are built into the very foundation of how we do business. James watched from the front row, proudly holding our 6-month-old daughter, Grace. We'd named her after his father's middle name, a reminder of the legacy we were really carrying forward. The rebuilt Hamilton Chen Financial became a model for corporate reform. Our stock price recovered and grew as investors recognized the value of true transparency. The board members who'd once sneered at my little startup now regularly sought my advice on technology and security. But the real satisfaction came from the smaller moments, like when young women in finance and technology reached out for mentoring, or when whistleblowers trusted us to help expose corporate wrongdoing, or when I overheard Grace's nanny reading her a magazine article about her mother's role in changing the face of modern banking. Victoria watches our success from prison, where she'll spend the rest of her life contemplating how thoroughly her prejudices and crimes destroyed everything she built. Sometimes she sends letters, still trying to manipulate and control. We return them unopened. The Hamilton mansion was sold, the proceeds going to a victim compensation fund. James and I bought a smaller home, modern and full of light. His father's old study desk sits in our home office, a reminder not of Victoria's crimes, but of Richard Hamilton's original vision for ethical business. Last week, I spoke at a women's business leadership conference. Someone asked what advice I'd give to others facing discrimination and doubts. Success, I told them, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Every time someone tells you to know your place, remember that innovation, integrity, and justice know no boundaries. The old guard of Hamilton Financial had believed in power through secrecy and control. Our new company thrives on transparency and shared success. Victoria never understood that true power comes not from what you hide, but from what you're willing to reveal. As for that little startup she dismissed, FraudWatch is now the industry standard for financial security used by banks and institutions worldwide. Every time it catches another potential fraud, I think about that family dinner where Victoria mocked my ambitions. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying what others built. It's about building something better from the ashes of their mistakes. Grace will grow up knowing both sides of her family story, the darkness of Victoria's crimes and the light of how we transformed them into something positive. She'll learn that success isn't measured by power over others, but by the positive change you create. And maybe, just maybe, she'll learn that the greatest satisfaction comes not from proving critics wrong, but from proving your own worth so thoroughly that their opinions become irrelevant.